This encore presentation of Disclosure is brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy. Enjoy!
Now, the music in my headphones tells me that it is time to go on the air and that my voice is broadcasting to, well, who knows who out there. Whether you're listening by podcast or by radio broadcast, whoever you're listening, you are more than welcome to what I hope possibly, perhaps, might become an award-winning episode of Disclosure from the Voice of Prophecy. My name is Shawn Boonstra. I am your host for the next 58 minutes and X number of seconds. You know, when you take the commercials away, maybe a little bit less. And I think you're going to want to listen to all 58 minutes today because we're going to be addressing what many people consider to be, well, in the faith-based community, a thorny topic, kind of uncomfortable, a little bit icky, but it is a topic that the Bible spends an awful lot of time discussing, and that is the subject of money, filthy lucre, mammon. And I know just the mention of the topic seems a little bit out of place in Christian circles because we like to think God is all about our devotional life and He's all for kindness to others and forgiveness and goodwill. But money, well, that's not for Christians to discuss. That's a subject that is better left out in the marketplace of evil thoughts, where mustache-twirling empire builders drive poor old tenants out of their homes in the dead of winter and tie them to the tracks because they need that house so that they can rip it down and build a mall or drill for oil and strip mine the land, and then Dudley Do-Right appears and puts money out of its place. But you know, that is not the way. That is not the way that the Bible handles the subject of money. And I know we love to say, and we think we're quoting the Bible when we say it, we love to say, money is the root of all evil. But if you actually go and read the Bible, you find the beginnings of that statement in 1 Timothy chapter 6. If you look at what it says, it never says that money is the root of all evil. What it says is the love of money is the root of all evil. So in other words, there really is an appropriate relationship between Christians and money. And for that matter, that means there's also such a thing as an inappropriate relationship between Christians and their money. And I guess I want to spend today's episode trying to sort that out. What is the right way for Christians to think about money? What's the wrong way for Christians to think about money? And because I am not necessarily the brightest bulb in the chandelier or the sharpest knife in the drawer, I've brought in expertise. I've got Bill Hay with me in studio, a man who just happens to work right here in the building. Bill, that was handy. You're right here in the building, and I can hardly wait to get into our discussion. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you had no choice because you work at the Voice of Prophecy. You had to come into studio. But just for the sake of those who are listening, enlighten us a little bit. What is exactly that you do around here?
I work in the Planned Giving and Trust Services Department, which I call the Department of Mutual Benefit.
Okay, why?
That means when people want to make large gifts, it's my job to figure out how I can best make that gift beneficial not only to the ministry, but also to them.
And if we have time today, we'll talk a little bit about how that kind of thing can happen. But I've got to say, I am glad that you and that department are there. Just to get this out on the air, we are a faith-based ministry. We live by faith, and we also live by donations. We are entirely funded by those who believe in what we are doing. And so I don't do this on the air very often, but you're right here, Bill. So, hey, if the Spirit moves you, we could use your help. How about that?
All right.
We don't sell anything. The gospel is free, but we could use your help. It wouldn't hurt, you know, especially as you're thinking about the end of the year. Beat the tax man. Help us out and get a benefit yourself. All right. Yes. That is the end of the shameless plug for donations for Disclosure in the Voice of Prophecy. Bill, I'm kind of keen to get into the subject, money, because, well, I'm the son of Dutch immigrants, and we all know that the Dutch are cheap, and we really think about money a lot. And matter of fact, in my family, the joke was we're so cheap that we buy 2-ply toilet paper and pull the plies apart to save money. And that's cheap. But I was thinking about this because over the years, you know, I've just crossed the 50 line as people are listening to this. I've made some really stupid mistakes over the year. Have you ever done something in your past that you are now embarrassed of financially?
I have a story. 4th of July, my wife and I are on the fairgrounds, walking past all the booths where the hawkers are, and here's a guy with these cool little scooters. pneumatic tires, kind of powerful little scooters, stand up and little electric scooters, dual batteries
Oh,
in
okay.
it.
This is your powered scooter.
The powered
Yeah.
scooter. And man, I stepped on that thing and I said, man, I'm in love. This thing rides great and everything else. How much? $700. Oh, no. Well, that's a lot of money. How much for two of them?
Uh-oh.
I wrote him a check for $1,300.
No
And
kidding.
it wasn't even sunset before I realized I had made a mistake that I would someday be talking about on the radio.
No kidding. Yeah. And here you are.
Here I
So
am.
the scooters weren't worth the money?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, they were. You could go to the parts house and buy the same scooter for probably $150, and
Uh-oh.
I just fell into
So
the
this
arms
was like
of a
at the
hawker.
county fair?
Yep.
Yeah, at the county fair, nothing is as advertised. No. I've got one that's really embarrassing. When I was in my early 20s, I fell for the envelope stuffing scheme. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I'm willing to admit this on radio now. I've swallowed my pride and admit it. Ad in the classifieds, if you're under 30, classifieds were little ads with maybe 20 words that were at the end of the newspaper. And it said, you can make $20 an hour stuffing envelopes. And in those days, $20 an hour was a fortune. And I wrote away. And I got an answer, and they said, you have to pick your plan. Do you want to make X number of dollars, X number? And now I'm suspicious, but I follow through anyway because I'd like to make $20 an hour in a world where I was making about $3. And so I filled it in, and I just signed up for the biggest plan, of course, which now they wanted $50 for the plan. And so I sent $50. And then I got a letter explaining nobody's going to pay you $20 an hour to stuff envelopes. Take out an ad in the classified and promise people they can make money stuffing envelopes, and then stuff this letter in there and send it to them. I felt like an idiot. I still kind of feel like an idiot admitting it, but learned something that day. There's nothing for free. And they don't post ads
free
for my
lunch.
benefit, but for theirs. Well, listen, let's talk about money a little bit. In the world of Christianity, Christians often refer to the subject of money and how Christians relate to money under the title of stewardship. I hear that all the time in church when somebody's about to take up an offering, they discuss stewardship. So help me unpack that term a little bit, the concept of stewardship. What are people talking about when they use that word?
The short answer for stewardship is managing everything in life according to God's will, and the best place I know of to determine God's will is His Word, the Bible.
Right.
So the word steward is actually an archaic term meaning manager, supervisor, fiduciary, that sort of thing, that you're actually taking care of somebody else's stuff for them.
Okay.
Let's say I own a fast food restaurant.
Okay.
I'm going to hire Shawn Boomster to be my manager.
You wouldn't want that, but for the sake of argument, that's it, because I don't know how to stay out of the French fries.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so for the sake of argument, I'm going to run. You own it.
I
I'll
own
run it.
You run it. You're in there every day. You're in there doing a lot of the things that the owner does, like make decisions, you hire, you fire, you pay the bills, you do all kinds of stuff like this as a manager, but you're still not the owner. You still have an owner to report to.
Sure.
Okay, stick the word Christian in front of the word steward or stewardship, and you come up with, I'm simply a manager and God is the owner. I'm the steward, I'm the manager, and God really is the ultimate owner. He owns me,
Right.
He's loaned me my time on earth, He's loaned me the money I can spend. He has loaned me my children, my talents, my abilities. Stewardship means I acknowledge God's the owner. I'm just the manager, according to His word.
Which would sort of change your perspective as to how you manage things. I mean, in theory, you'd like to think that if you're managing somebody else's things, you'd actually, that was the way I was raised, that you would take better care of them because it wasn't yours.
Yes.
And maybe we've shifted as a society to the other way. Hey, it's somebody else is paying for it. I'll run it into the dirt. But when I was a kid, if you borrowed something from a friend and you broke it, you replaced it with something better because the obligation was so large. It wasn't mine, and I was supposed to take care of it. And it was a reflection of my character as to whether or not I took good care of it.
Take it back in better condition than you picked it up. That's,
Yeah.
That's sort of the...
I actually borrowed a car for my first date because I did not own a car in college. And I remember thinking, okay, that was pretty generous. And I brought it back full of gas. I took it to the car wash and washed it.
There you go.
Yeah, because it wasn't mine. So that I would have been a steward of my buddy Tim's car.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that worked well, by the way. I'm married to the woman I picked up in that borrowed car. It worked out well. So you were saying the best place to figure out what God wants is the Bible.
His Word, the Bible. And the Bible's filled with counsel on how to be a steward. I think of the Golden Rule. Treat everybody else as we ourselves would want to be treated. That's a great stewardship verse. Exodus 20, right in the heart of the Ten Commandments, don't steal. That's a great stewardship verse.
Well, how would that apply? I mean, I want to make sure we're thinking about this carefully. Don't steal. How would that apply to a steward then?
A steward would, in managing somebody else's goods, would certainly not want to harm others or be a detriment to others. And the stealing would certainly fall into that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about it in the act of being a steward. It would be theft for me to start treating God's possessions as if I own them, because that's really what theft is, isn't it? Taking what isn't yours.
Embezzlement, yeah.
Embezzlement. Oh, I haven't. Boy, there's got to be a book in there somewhere, right? Embezzling from God. And
embezzling God's
I got to write that down.
Yes,
I got to write that down. All right. What else have you found in the Scripture?
1 Timothy, take care of your family. If you don't, you're like an unbeliever and worse than an infidel.
Yeah, that's the old King James language, and I prefer that one. Worse than an infidel.
Worse than an infidel.
If you're not responsible for your family.
Yeah,
Right.
And they're talking about finance. They're talking about money there. Be generous with others, especially the poor. That's the old Mosaic law in Deuteronomy. Take care of widows and orphans. Proverbs has got some interesting tidbits on money management and stewardship. Don't co-sign for others' loans. Proverbs 22.
That's a big one. So do you ever co-sign for anybody's loans?
Not anymore.
No. Well, you often learn the hard way not to do that, but that's actually in Proverbs 22.
Yeah, Proverbs 22.
Don't be a guarantor for, well, it's not the language it uses. I'm trying to remember the exact text, but basically it tells you don't co-sign.
Right, exactly. And that the same chapter talks about not going into debt.
Okay.
Proverbs 22 has got several good tidbits in there.
We should spend some time on debt today, because I can think of a time in the past when Christians railed against debt, and that's fallen silent. So maybe a little later in the show, we'll revisit that.
Yeah,
And
good.
What else have we got?
Well, another one that the text that people think about when they think of stewardship is generally Malachi 3.
I knew you were going to go there.
Yes.
I've heard every so often, just before they take the offering in church, someone will stand up and read Malachi chapter 3.
Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse.
Yeah.
That's great. It's instructions. As a steward, God has a claim on 10% of my money and 15% of my time. He claims 1 day a week as his.
Yep.
He claims 10% of my money, my income, as his. And in order to be a faithful steward, I would return to him what he claims as his own, which is the 10%.
Which is a fascinating concept, because if you think about it, and we're going to have to take a break here in a second, and I want to come back to tithing for just a minute, because I think there's some misunderstanding about that in modern Christianity. But if you think about it, if God owns it all and the business arrangement is that you keep 90% of the proceeds and the owner takes 10%, I'm aghast a little bit. Don't you mean you get 90%, Lord, and I take 10%? Because you own the joint? I mean, if you own the fast food restaurant and told me I get to keep 90%, I'd be, wow, I didn't put the capital in.
Right.
I didn't put the capital in. It's a good deal, and there's the music. So we're going to have to take a break, and when we come back, I'm sitting down with Bill Hay, and we're talking about Christians and their relationship to, well, I wanted to say filthy lucre. That's not the right word. We're going to disabuse ourselves of the notion that it is filthy lucre, but look at it as a tool and how that tool is best used in a Christian's hands. What does it mean to be a good steward? What does it mean to take care of the things that God has placed in your hands and to maximize them for both the kingdom and, frankly, for your family and for yourself? So we're going to take a short break. Go get a pen and paper, and get a Bible too, because we'll look at Bible passages as we go along. But you want a pen and paper to write down these amazing offers from the good people at the VOP, and I'll be right back.
Retirement planning can be a stressful process, but it doesn't have to be. The friendly people at the Voice of Prophecy can walk you through the entire process and explain all of your options based on your specific needs. Whether you'd like to set up a trust for income or make a gift that will benefit your loved ones and change lives through the Voice of Prophecy, we're here to help. To learn more, call 1-800-348-5993.
Earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires. Around us, homes are being lost, lives are threatened, and some people are asking the question, does God even care about me? The Bible answers that question, and what it says is very encouraging. Find out what God says regarding this topic and some of life's greatest issues in our free Discover Bible guides. Go to VOP.com and click on Study, or call us 888-456-7933.
And we are back from the break. I hope you had time to go outside, get some fresh air, run around the block a couple of times, and grab a pen and paper and a Bible and sit down and join us again. My name is Shawn Boonstra. You're listening to Disclosure from the Voice of Prophecy, and I'm sitting down with Bill Hay, who is giving me a biblical education on how Christians relate to money. And just before the break, we were looking at a number of key points the Bible makes, or some advice it gives, in broad terms. We're talking about that we are stewards, that we have been left to manage what actually belongs to God, and that the Christian doesn't believe they own anything, that it's all on loan to them from God. And just as we were going to the break, we were talking about the concept of tithe. We just touched on that, Bill. And so let's talk about that a little bit more, because Christians for a long time have talked about tithing, and maybe somebody out there doesn't know what it is.
God has a claim. According to Malachi 3, he claims 10% of our income. He claims 15% of our time, and there is a very special blessing in that whole passage for people who are willing to sign on to the concept of stewardship, be a manager for God's goods. And that blessing is, I will open the windows of heaven and pour out so many blessings that you won't even have room enough to receive them. I'll tell you, I don't know what that looks like, but I want part of it.
Oh, yeah. I do too. And what's interesting is that God knows. The very language that's used there in Malachi 3 indicates that God knows that this is not an easy thing for people who are basically self-interested. We all are. That's one of the definitions of, one of the things that makes us sinners, is that our number one priority is self. And so God knows right off the bat, it's going to be really hard for me to part with that 10%. And so he dares me. The language is a dare. Prove me now. That's the old King James, isn't it? Prove me now herewith to see if I will not open the... So he's saying, I know it doesn't make sense on paper, but I dare you to try this. So years ago, 30 or so now, I took the dare. I thought, all right. And that's not easy for a guy like me. It's like, okay, I deal in cash. I work for everything I've earned. It's mine, mine, mine. That's the human mentality. I'm going to let go of 10%. And you feel like, well, that's really generous. It's not that generous if you don't own it. So I did it, and here's what I've discovered. I mean, this is just testimony, Bill. Over the years, we've never stopped doing it. As a matter of fact, we've started to give even more, because 90% is what you're left over with if you give 10 back to God. He owns it all, but he only asks for a remission of 10% of everything he enables you to earn. And I've discovered that when I kept 100%, I always wondered where the money was going to come from and how I'd meet the bills. But on 90%, there was money left over. Now, that doesn't make mathematical sense, but I'm not a wealthy man. When it says that it'll open up the windows of heaven, it didn't. I don't have a fleet of cars or a private jet or a summer cottage. I don't even have a camper. So I'm not a wealthy man, but I look back over the last almost 30 years, and I've never lacked for anything I needed, ever. And there's no explaining it, but somehow, and I know people who make twice what I make, and they look and say, how are you getting by on this? It's giving God what he asked, and he opens the windows of heaven. I don't know how it's been for you, but that promise, he dared me to do it. I dared, and wow, I'll never stop doing that.
The thing that people strive for more than anything else is not that cabin, and not that boat, and not that camper. It's contentment. It's happiness. It's, contentment with what you have.
Right.
And I believe that that's part of what God is giving us, that the wealthy man can't buy.
Yeah.
That the 100% can't buy, that the 90% can buy, is contentment, happiness, satisfaction with life. I believe those are God-given traits that are rewarded or awarded to people that are within his will, that have signed on to be stewards, that others that have not tend to be maybe a little more discontent, a little more chafing, wanting more, or whatever else. Right. If you're content with what you have, what difference does it make if it's 90% or 100% if you're content with what you have?
And that's the big lesson. I often hear these prosperity preachers on TV. I'm not going to name names, doesn't matter who they are, but biblically speaking, they kind of drive me nuts because they pull out that text that says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And they basically are saying, if you name it, you can claim it. God will give it to you. And if you want to be a millionaire, claim it. And I can do all things through God who strengthens me. I'm going to be a millionaire. What Paul's talking about in that passage, he says, I've learned to live with plenty and I've learned to be abased. I've learned to be content in whatever circumstance I'm in. And the secret wasn't the money. The secret was the happiness, the contentment.
Yes.
I've got to say, Bill, that God has taken care of us. I can think of times in the very beginning when I know that my wife needed a new dress for some event that we're going to go to, and we're newlyweds, and there's not a lot of extra cash when you're newlywed, and we tithed, and suddenly things would happen. We'd get a check from the government saying we miscalculated how much we owed you on your tax return this year. I mean, when does the IRS ever go back and review your tax return to give you more? And it was exactly what we needed for the new dress, down to the penny. That it's like God tapping you on the shoulder, saying, if you just trust me, I got you.
Yes.
I got you.
And those stories like that abound. Everybody has multiple stories like that. And so if somebody's out there that is wondering about tithing and they can't do the math, they think it just does not add up.
And it doesn't always.
No,
not on
it doesn't.
paper. No,
it does not. I would encourage them to be faithful with what God has claimed.
Yeah. He says, prove me.
Yep.
So God knows it's going to take a little bit of courage to take that step of faith. Now, I hear some people saying that was Old Testament. That was for the Levitical priesthood. They didn't get land, and so they got tithes, and now we're past that, and Christians don't tithe anymore. But as I've been reading my New Testament, I don't find that's the case. It is mentioned in the New Testament, isn't it? I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Matthew 23, Jesus tells, he is condemning, the legalists in his midst, and he says, you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin. And before anyone thinks that Jesus is saying you don't have to pay tithe anymore, he says, what he's telling them is you neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy. And
justice,
so, yeah,
yes.
You're going through the motions, but you don't love God. And but before we dismiss the idea of tithe, he says you ought to have done that. Don't leave that undone, but you should be doing these other things as well.
Yes.
What is it? 1 Corinthians 9, Paul says those who live of the gospel have the right to eat of the gospel. So, your pastor's got a right to eat.
Yeah.
So, which is why I
like
think,
the idea.
Yeah, no, I like it too. And just so that we know, we're not preaching tithe today because Bill or I are paid out of tithe dollars. We're not. This is a self-funded ministry and so on. But I'd encourage you, don't ignore this blessing from God. This is so much more than just an obligation.
Opening the windows of heaven and pouring out a blessing.
Yeah, it really is. And if you want the greatest business partner in the world, why wouldn't you want God in charge of your books?
Yes.
How do you go wrong with that?
The owner of the whole world, the creator of the whole world.
Yeah.
That's a good partner to have.
Well, listen, Bill, once you understand everything that you have, everything in my house belongs to God. Well, first of all, it makes me think about what's in my house. Would God want to own this? No, I'm being serious. Like, would God really want to own this? That's a good question to put to yourself when you go shopping on Amazon. Does God want to own this? That doesn't mean you can't enjoy life, but once I understand that concept and that he's put me in charge of his possessions as a steward, I still have this tendency to want a little more money. I always want to make a little bit more. But now that I understand I'm in partnership with God, maybe I want more for a different set of reasons. Maybe it's not the boat or the camper, or I look at what God wants to accomplish in this world and I'm thinking, hey, he's given me a role to play in accomplishing what he wants to do, and I can participate. I hesitate to say I can help God because he doesn't need my help, but I can participate. He's allowing me to participate. So think about what I can do with the money that comes in. I could provide for my wife. I made a vow to her that I will care for you to the day one of us is gone, right? A little more money means I could set that aside and she doesn't have to live in a camper eating cat food when she's older. Or I could make things happen that benefit the kingdom of God. Maybe my church wants to participate in outreach, that kind of thing. I'd love to have a little more money. So help me understand, how could I do that? How could I have more of God's resources? And I honestly mean that I'd like to put more into God's work and so on, but how could I increase the resources that I have at my disposal? How could I make sure that there's more money for the things that matter?
Well, if I was to pick one thing that would probably help give more money at the end of the month, it would be to not pay interest. And, of course, interest gets paid when you're in debt. So staying out of debt is really the number one way to increase your disposable income.
Oh, now you're stepping on toes, because in the West, don't we kind of assume debt is a part of life?
We do. It's a cultural given now, but debt is a double whammy. It not only takes cash out of your pocket in the form of interest payments, it also obligates or commits future earnings, sometimes for houses, 30 years. I know that 30 years from now, X amount of my dollars is going to be taken out of my paycheck to pay for that house. So debt, you've got to pay the interest, and you also have to make the payments out of your paycheck. The average person today, in one study, has about $38,000 in personal debt. That's not including mortgages.
$38,000.
$38,000
Wow.
is the average personal debt, and
And you're not talking a mortgage now. You're talking
student
other
loans,
debts.
car loans, credit card debt, medical debt, whatever debt's out there. The average is $38,000. The average credit card, now not the average person, but the average credit card has $6,500 balance on that.
Wow.
$6,500 in balance. The average person pays about $1,150 a year in interest on credit cards.
All right, so that's a key point right there. You said about $1,150 a year just in the interest
Call
payments.
it $100 a month.
Okay, so there's $100 a month, and people say, man, I just can't participate in the church. But if we didn't borrow as often, if you could get rid of $100 in interest payments, on your credit card, what could I do? When the church makes an appeal, we need pew Bibles. Man, I could provide 20 of those.
Yep.
Or, we're going to send a student missionary to Bali for a summer. I could commit to paying $600. I'll support that for 6 months. But right now it's being eaten up by my credit card.
With no interest, you can do all that stuff. Some estimations are that we as Americans will pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000
Okay, wait a minute.
over a lifetime.
That's
in
more
interest.
than the value of the average home.
Exactly.
Well, except maybe in New York or California. But here in sunny Colorado, that's more than the value of an average home gone. You
Yes.
could have had a house paid for if you'd avoided the interest payments on your credit card.
Yes. Now, the $600,000 does include mortgage debt, credit card debt.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Student loans,
So I misread that a little bit. Okay.
No,
But still,
all
it's a
debt.
phenomenal amount of money.
The average American pays $600,000 in interest over their lifetime.
So statistically, I'm probably going to die anywhere from 2 to 6 years sooner than my wife. What if I had $600,000 laid up for her after I'm gone? She's going to go on another 6 years. That's a comfortable income for my wife if I just avoid. I'm just thinking, man, and now it's too late for me to go back. I'm halfway through this field. I've blown the $300,000 already, but it's not too late to start now.
Right.
And get
It
that
really
interest out of my life.
It really isn't. So the one thing, if you were to say, what one thing can I do to have more money at the end of the month, I would say get out of debt, stay out of debt, and that will avoid paying interest to the tune of the average of $100 a month.
Wow. That's amazing. And I think about debt, and I know we're going to have to take another break. It's amazing how fast time goes when we're talking about something exciting like money. Christians used to rail against debt. I can point you to sermons from the 18th and even the early 19th and 20th centuries where preachers are warning their congregations, avoid this. This is not God's will for your life. So I think we'll revisit this a few minutes and talk more about debt, because debt is the one thing that seems to cripple so many people. And I want to examine that a little bit, and that's kind of an eye-opener on the credit card business. Man, if I could take back $100 a month, what does that mean? What does that mean for my kids' college education? What does that mean for my wife's retirement? And those kinds of things are for God's church. We're going to take a little break. I'm with Bill Hay. You're listening to Disclosure from the Voice of Prophecy. We're talking about Christians and how they relate to money. So we'll be right back after this.
Disclosure is just one of the programs brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy, like the audio adventure program Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a weekly Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy faith-building stories with Jake Donovan, Mr. Simon, and others in this small mountain town. Each summer, campers visit Discovery Mountain, where they sing songs, learn about God, and reenact a Bible story with the help of drama teachers Miss Wendy and Miss Tamra. With 24 full episodes every year and programming every week, your family will have something uplifting to listen to every week. Listen to episodes on demand and watch video features from Director Doug at discoverymountain.com or on your favorite podcast platform. That's discoverymountain.com.
Well, if this was a football game, we would have just come through the halftime show, and we'd be into our third segment out of 4. You are listening to Disclosure. My name is Shawn Boonstra, and this program is brought to you by the good people at the Voice of Prophecy, one of the oldest continuously I just messed that up, Bill. Do you hear me mess that up on radio?
I heard that.
But basically, it's one of the oldest continuously broadcasting faith-based ministries in the world.
90 years this year.
90 years old. Yeah, not me. Not me. Parts of my body feel like they're 90. I've got a back that feels 90, but other than that, I'm sitting down with Bill Hay. We're talking about Christians and filthy lucre, except that we're going to disabuse ourselves of the notion that all lucre is filthy, and talk about an appropriate relationship between Christians and money. And just before the break, we were talking about debt, and I was saying, listen, knowing that everything I own is God's, Bill, I'd like to put more of what I have into the things that would put a smile on God's face. That includes, as you pointed out, taking care of your family. My family isn't primarily somebody else's response. God put me there to take care of them. And if I can eliminate interest, you were saying before the break, what was it, $100 a month? $100 a month on credit card
That's
interest
average,
or total interest?
Average person, yes.
Oh, that's credit card interest, the average person. Get rid of that. $100 a month. Some people say, I can't save for retirement. That would be $1,200 a year you could put somewhere. And some of you out there work for companies that match your contribution. So now it's $2,400.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is starting to be fun, multiplying for the right reasons
Yes.
and so on. You know, here's the question I've got, because you were pointing out debt, and I've noticed that years ago, preachers used to preach on the evils of debt to their congregations. And I was reading Charles Spurgeon's, it was either a biography of him, an old one written in his day virtually, or an autobiography. I can't remember if he wrote it or not. But he does tell the story where as a little boy he borrowed money to buy a pencil, and when he got home his father gave him a spanking because Christians don't borrow money. What is it about debt that Christians should be aware of? You've kind of touched on that. Why do you think our ancestors avoided it like the plague? And maybe the harder question is, why do you think we don't really talk about it anymore?
Well, debt is a major source of anxiety, stress, that sense of obligation, being beholden. Money problems are the number one cause of divorce. No surprise there.
It still is, really, number one cause.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Just those factors should make you pause and want to get out of debt. Our ancestors were more horrified at the thought of being beholden to others in former times. That was long before the entitlement age that we now live in.
Right.
Also, being out of debt is a biblical principle. And here in America, people used to be more in tune with biblical standards and want to align their lives and their lifestyle with what the Bible taught. Today, it's become the cultural norm. It's the aberration. It's the freak that doesn't have debt. It's the freak that doesn't live on credit. And so nobody equates it with anything negative or bad or much less sinful or unspiritual as it used to be.
Right. You know, Gina and I talk about this all the time, and we have often caught ourselves saying, you know, when something goes really wrong, like the furnace blows up or the roof is leaking, we've often sat down and said, aren't you glad we don't have a mountain of debt? Now, just in case anybody thinks I make a lot of money, I don't. I make less than the average in my profession. I make about the average of what anyone in a community makes. That's roughly what I earn. And so we don't have a lot of money, but we have chosen that we would rather live without than go into debt. And then when the big crunches come, it's like, aren't you glad we don't have a mountain of debt? Aren't you glad that, you know, we do have some. I do have a mortgage. But other than that, it's like, wow, now it's time to put our kids in college. Aren't you glad we're not also on top of that paying down a bill from 10 years ago?
When the transmission goes bad or when the time comes to buy a new car, the whole idea of not having to add that on top of a bunch of debt, it takes a lot of stress off the marriage.
It really does. It really does. Now, we have stress. But here's what I've thought about with debt. You know, debt, well, if I'm a steward, if I'm actually managing God's resources, if you are running your fast food restaurant in your example and you came to me and said, well, how much did you pay for the deep fryer? I said, I paid $50 for, or I don't know what they're worth, $500. $500 for the deep fryer. And you say, okay, but then you find out I bought it on time. What I really paid for it was $1,000 because the interest is going to make it twice as that. I wouldn't want to give you as the owner that report that I spent twice what I should on that deep fryer. I'd like you to know I got a good deal.
Faithful stewards don't do that. Faithful stewards are economize. They do the best they can with what they've got.
So if God taps me on the shoulder and says, all right, you bought a bicycle, and that's nice. You're going to ride it to work. It's good for your health. There's a number of, and you paid $200. I don't know what bicycles are worth anymore. I'm from the old days when they were worth $50. But, $100 for, I don't know, what are they worth now? Probably $500 by now. For
you can
nice
buy
bicycle.
them at cheap discount stores for $150.
Okay,
but
so $150.
You can spend $12,000 on a bicycle. But,
$100 bicycle I'm buying. And God says, that's very nice. I like you to have that bicycle. You're getting to work on it. You're getting some exercise. What did you pay? And then I have to admit to God that I took $200 of his resources to pay for a $100 bike because I bought it on 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. It does add up that way, doesn't it? I mean, you were talking to me in the break about a credit card bill.
I tell you what, Shawn, this absolutely floored me. I could not believe what I was seeing. But recently, I had a lot of travel during a month and a few other expenses like that. I had my credit card bill come in at just at $5,000 for the 1 month.
Okay.
Federal law requires that the credit card companies divulge or reveal what it would take to pay off this debt, this $5,000, if only the minimum payment was made.
Okay. And they usually list that somewhere on the bill.
Federal law requires it. Only the minimum being paid, the balance, the time that it would take to pay off $5,000 is 31 years.
Get out of here. Your bill says 31 years of payments.
And the total that will be paid is triple the $5,000.
In 31 years, I'm going to be well into my 80s, I think. Wow.
The point is, we're not talking about the buying of a house or a franchise or anything like that. We're talking about a 1 month's worth of travel, $5,000. It takes 31 years to pay it off. So, when you're making minimum payments, it's
what's the minimum payment on that? What did they suggest?
$177. Oh, I'm sorry. No, the minimum payment on this, $100.
$100
minimum
is
payment
the
due,
minimum
$100.
payment.
Mm-hmm.
So minimum payments, you'll be paying that balance for 31 years. And that's amazing because there's a lot of people in this day and age that are making $4,000 or $5,000 a month. It's a month income, but you're going to be paying that back over 31 years. What would be the total if you paid it that way? How much does that become?
Almost $15,000, almost triple, $14,400.
Okay, so my bicycle example was
triple.
wrong. I should have said $300 on the one because I'm paying it on time.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Stewardship, not only is it glorifying God, it's making life better for we ourselves. That's part of the opening the windows of heaven and pouring out the blessings that we don't even have room to receive.
Well, isn't that the amazing thing? Is that we tend to, in our sinful state, look at the things God says, hey, live this way, and we kind of grit our teeth. All right, if you insist, if that's the rule, I'll do it. Not understanding that this does not just bring more glory to who God is and reveal his love to the world, but it's the best way to live.
Best for us, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, let's say I do have some debt in my life. Okay, Bill, let's say that, I've got a credit card balance, several $1,000s. Let's say, for example, I've got a car payment as well and a house payment, and you're telling me get out of debt. What could I do? What are the steps I take to start digging my way out of that red ink?
By far the best thing to do is to patch the hole before you begin bailing water.
All right, unpack that for me a little bit.
All righty. What you do is you quit getting further. You quit digging your hole deeper. You shred those credit cards. You just make a vow that you're going to live on what you have.
Literally shred them. You're talking, that's not figuratively.
Literally
get rid of
shred them. Literally shred. You cease to carry them, cease to
a lot of
have
people,
them.
a lot of people are thinking, I know I can hear it in their heads right now. How do you live without a credit card?
Well, I'm not saying that you have to live without a credit card. We can come back to that.
Okay.
My thing is quit increasing your debt. The credit card itself is just a symptom of the problem. The debt is the problem, not the credit card.
Yeah, got it.
Quit going deeper into debt. If you need to shred the credit card, certainly do that. But
particularly
at least
if you have a
quit increasing
problem,
the
if
debt.
it is a problem, it might not be a bad 6 months to live without a credit card because I think at least at the end of the 6 months, you'd understand just how often you had been using it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll open your eyes.
Wow.
So once you've quit racking up the debt, once you've quit buying things on credit, once you've quit signing up for new services and new contracts, Then you determine the cost of your most basic needs. Now, what I call basic needs is 5 things.
Okay.
Food.
Yep. Need
clothing. Yep. Clothing, lodging, utilities, and transportation. Those are the 5 basic needs that we as humans have. Then what you do is you write a budget that covers those 5 basic needs, and then everything above paying for the 5 basic needs you throw at the debt.
Okay, now listen, you said the B word, you said budget. I want to come back to that in just a minute, because I just wanted to, you said your most basic needs. And so as I'm looking at these needs, food, clothing, lodging, utilities, and keeping the lights on, transportation, there are needs and there are needs. And when you say basic, I think that's probably an important word there, because there's transportation, but there's basic transportation, and there's the 6-figure Tesla that I want. You're talking needs.
Needs, our basic needs. People that are serious about getting out of debt are able to trim some of those things. I mean, I know people that are canceling their cell phone contracts. They're going without cell phone.
And some of those are more expensive than you would dream, right? Because you're paying $70, $80 a month, and you signed up for 2 or 3 years. It racks up.
And many. It's not unusual to have phone bills be $300-$400 a month.
That's an awful lot of money. It's not.
Yeah, and it doesn't fall into the basic 5 things. Now, I will, in all fairness, say that communication is one of the things that I would be one of the first things I'd sign up for after I got out of debt. But if you have to get rid of your cell phone to do it, it's not one of the 5 basic needs.
Well, one of the things that can be done nowadays is, I'm not particularly addicted to television, but why are you paying $100 a month for cable? You can, for $60, buy a box that plays a lot of great Christian programming or basically gets you your news and whatever you want, and quit paying bills. I disconnected our home phone line. I don't have a landline anymore, because why was I renting a phone? Remember renting telephones from the phone company and stuff?
Yes.
There's a lot of places to do this, but the other one was, the other day, I'm a huge fan of dollar stores. I go in there, and I went in there, I needed to buy shampoo, hand soap, paper towels, and I filled 2 bags for $6 with exactly the same product that came from the big supermarket at 6 and 7 times the price.
Right.
Yeah, so basic. What do you actually need and what do you actually want? Okay, so now you said the B word, and we're going to have to take a break in a moment, but let's take a look at budgets for just a minute. And I know that someone out there is going, oh, that's a lot of work. I'm going to change the station. Let's talk about budgets. We're going to run out of time, aren't we? It's like a minute to the break, but this would be a phenomenal segment.
I don't want to spend very much time on budgeting, because there's a lot of good information out there online. There's a lot of good books written. There's just a lot of stuff out there. But let me just say this. The budget is not like a weight loss diet where you walk around hungry and miserable all the time, where you're totally depriving yourself. Every bite you take, you feel guilty about. You feel nothing but guilt. You feel nothing but inadequacy and all that sort of stuff. The budget is not like that.
Okay. Well, let's come back. They're playing the music, which means that I have burned through my budgeted time. See how I did that? See how I did that, guys? That's how a consummate broadcasting professional segues to the commercial, or at least flukes out once in a while. I'm sitting down with Bill Hay. We're talking about Christians and money, and we've barely scraped the surface on this, Bill. I think we have, but we're getting some good material here. Get out of debt. Live by a budget. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to come back to the B word. We're going to come back to budgeting and what that could do for making you a better steward of the resources God has blessed you with. We'll be right back after this message.
As you may know, the Voice of Prophecy is supported by people just like you. We provide Christ-centered programs and Bible studies free of charge so that no one is left out. If you've been blessed by these programs and would like to pay it forward, we invite you to visit vop.com/give to make your tax-deductible donation. We're equipping the world for Christ to come, and your support will make a direct impact on so many lives. That's vop.com/give.
All around us, the world is changing. Homes are being lost, lives are being threatened, and some people are asking the question, does God even care about me? The Bible answers that question, and what it says is very encouraging. Find out what God says regarding this topic and some of life's greatest issues in our free Discover Bible guides. You can get yours by going to VOP.com, click on Study, or call us at 888-456-7933. 888-456-7933.
It is hard to believe how fast an hour goes by when you're talking about cash, filthy lucre, money, mammon. What are the other words the Bible uses for it? But it's really talking about attitudes toward money instead of the money itself. Here's the reality. Ever since we left the Garden of Eden, we have exchanged our time in this world, our limited time, for money. And Bill, I think I heard somebody once say, and it was one of the better descriptions I've heard, money is congealed life. Because you take your life and you exchange it. I'm exchanging 8 hours a day would be a dream. I'm exchanging 14 hours a day for a paycheck. So what I have at the end of the day, the congealment of my life, is the money in the bank. And when you think about that, it's like, okay, this is what I did with my life. And now I can take my congealed life and I can convert those hours I might have worked for an employer into hours that I worked for God, because some of that congealed life goes back to Him.
Yes.
I don't know. Congealed life was a cool way to think about it one time. It's like,
the lowest common denominator of work.
Yeah. Some point we decided we all exist better if we have a medium of exchange, because if I raise chickens, you might not want my eggs, but you need wheat, but you can pay me cash, and it works that way. So you said the B word last segment. We're talking budgeting. You're saying, look, this is not like a weight loss diet where you're depriving yourself. So then what is a budget? Talk to me about budgeting, because I'm not convinced that's a skill we learn anymore. I was taught in school. As a matter of fact, in the 8th grade, they made us fill out a tax return. Here's a phony pay slip. And you fill out a tax return and develop a household budget. There was some consumer education. I'm not sure they do that anymore.
It would be rare. It'd be rare to find.
So talk to me a little bit about budgeting. It's not a weight loss diet, so what is it?
It is, I would compare it more to a to-do list that you go home on your day off, and when you wake up, you make yourself out a to-do list.
Okay.
That to-do list is not something that deprives you of time or makes you miserable. All it does is helps you organize your priorities, make sure you don't waste time, keep you focused, all that sort of thing. So a budget really is simply a to-do list for your dollars. It's not like you've got to get along with nothing. All it is just making sure that the dollars are focused, that they're applied properly, and that they do the job that they're supposed to be doing. I have a friend. This couple was they were digging out of a financial hole.
Yeah.
They had a budget, and their anniversary rolled around, and they were on their way to a very nice restaurant for their anniversary meal. And the lady expressed to her husband, I feel guilty. I know that we have some financial needs, and yet we're going to a restaurant. We're probably going to drop $75 tonight for the two of us to go out.
Yeah, in a nice restaurant, it doesn't take long to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And he was the one that was, in this couple, he was the one that did the budget. He said, look, don't worry about this. It is in the budget. Nothing is going to go unpaid. Nothing is going to be problematic. This, going out and spending $75, the fact that it's in the budget means that it's justified, it's planned for, and it's a priority. And so now she could sit back and relax and enjoy her nice anniversary meal because they had a budget.
Right. There's some security behind it.
Exactly. If the dollars were all just flying out the window, and there was no real control, no real anything else, out of desperation, you wouldn't want to go out to eat because you didn't know what would be overlooked or not paid as a result of this anniversary meal. But because there was a budget, now all of a sudden, it's in the budget. We can do this now.
It gets a little more complicated budgeting. I remember I had a budget written out when I was a single man, and that was pretty easy. I'm the only one that's draining the budget.
Right.
Then suddenly you get married, and then you have some children, and suddenly the dollars are going out in corner. You're leaking in places you didn't. The budget helps you realize, am I leaking? Leaking. Yeah, hemorrhaging might be a better word. My wife and I had developed a rule finally that, and this might sound foolish and silly to some, but if any one of us was about to spend $50 or more, we placed a phone call to the other. Hey, is this in the budget?
Idea.
I'm about to buy, a new pair of jeans. Should I get the $30 ones or the $40 ones? Is it still in the budget for jeans this month? Because there might be a clothing budget, but my wife may have already, without me knowing it, bought all the kids' clothes for school and blown through the budget. So do I buy these jeans now or do I wait a month?
Yeah,
that kind of a thing.
That's a great plan.
I don't know. $50 seems low to some people, but it sure keeps you, if you set that threshold low, You stop leaks from becoming hemorrhages.
Yes,
So the
absolutely.
B word. You mentioned credit cards. I want to get back to credit cards because they're really the bane of existence in the Western world, I think. We're not as scared of debt as we should be. And in some ways, I wonder if we shouldn't call credit cards debt cards because that's really the end result. It's not
the
more
express
credit.
train.
Yeah, it really is. Talk to me a little bit about not letting your credit cards get out of control. How do you stanch that problem before it bleeds?
Well, as I said a few minutes ago, I'm a credit card holder.
And I am too.
Yeah, I don't think that it has to be a problem. Now, I know there are plenty of folks out there that believe that credit cards create the problem, but really they don't. As long as you, number one, pay the credit card in full, number two, on time, number three, every month.
So never carry a balance.
Never carry a balance. At the end of the month, it's at zero balance after you've pay it in full. If you find the time, if you come to the time where you are having to carry a balance from month to month, you're beginning to get into trouble.
You're going over your budget.
You're going over your budget. You're beginning to get into trouble. I was one time went into a convenience store to the cashier there, a young girl.
Like a 7-Eleven.
Yeah, late teens. I dropped my credit card on the counter, and she picked it up with kind of an interest in her eyes, kind of a renewed interest. She said, "Oh, credit card," she said. "My boyfriend and I have just applied for our first credit card."
Ah.
I said, "Oh, okay. Well, just be sure you pay it in full every month on time." And she looked at me and she hesitated. She was trying to process that a little bit, and she said, "Oh, we're planning to make a payment on it every month."
Oh, she didn't hear you.
I said, no, pay it in full, on time, every month. And her jaw just kind of fell a little slack, and she said, "Well, then why would we have a credit card?" And that seems to be the mentality that the credit card is kind of free money, that if you get it, you get some free money. And they don't. There's just a little disconnect there.
Well, we should always probably think about the fact that the credit card company's not giving you a credit card as a favor to you.
Right.
There's the only reason they want to do it is they're making money on it.
That's exactly right. And 60% of credit card holders pay it off every month. That's higher than what I thought.
No, that's actually better than I figured it would be.
Me too. I didn't think it'd be that high. Only 40% of the people have an ongoing revolving balance on their credit card. So I would encourage anybody that is buying on a credit card to pay in full, on time, every month, and that will minimize your risk of having your credit card be that one-way ticket to insolvency.
Well, people often talk about the magic of compounding interest. And when you're saving money, that's a big thing, that compounding interest. But it works the other direction.
The eighth wonder of the world all of a sudden becomes a real problem for you.
Yeah, no, it can work the other way. Every time you don't pay it, the debt gets bigger, and then the interest becomes more, and then that compounds and snowballs until suddenly you realize I can't pay it.
Right. Exactly right.
All right, so you say minimize the risk. What are the other risks of using a credit card?
Well, you can pay in full on time every month, and still there are some risks out there of having a credit card. So I just want to lay it out there that, yes, I do own a credit card, but there still are some risks and unexpected things that come down the pike. It seems like once every 2 or 3 years, something happens that I don't get my bill paid during the month. I mean, that's just all.
Time got away on you. You were traveling.
I was out of the country.
Yeah.
I thought I had done it, and I hadn't. I hadn't hit the go button on the pay, the bill pay of the bank or whatever. And down the pike comes unexpected fees and interest. About 3 months ago, this happened to me. I had to pay $62 in interest and fees.
Ow.
Yeah. Ow.
And there's a dinner out.
That hurts this tightwad terribly. But that I just have to slap myself on the forehead and say, you know what, that's just part of the cost of owning a credit card that I don't like, but hey, it happened and that's the way it is. So the risk is unexpected fees coming down the line. The other thing is that we subconsciously buy more if we're buying on credit cards than if not. One time I was overseas and walked past a chocolate shop there. And I thought, I was in Tokyo, Japan. And I said, Japanese chocolates. This would be great. I'll take some chocolates home for Sherry.
Yeah.
They were $8 a box. And I said, well, that's a cool gift. $8 isn't all that much for a nice gift for my wife when I get back home.
No. If you're getting away with $8 on a homecoming gift, that's pretty good.
I'm a tightwad.
Yeah. No, you're making my blood pump with that.
So I said, you know what? But I don't have any cash. I don't even have any Japanese yens. I guess I need to put it on my credit card. But you know what? $8 on a credit card with all the foreign exchanges and all the everything else. I shouldn't do that for just $8. Maybe I'll get 2 of them. Well, I walked out with 3 boxes of Japanese chocolates. If I had had cash, I'd have spent $8 on Japanese chocolates.
Right.
Since I had a credit card, it just didn't seem right. The percentages kick in. And the percent of the exchange fee and everything else is going to kick in and eat a bunch of this up. So I might as well buy 3 of them instead of just 1 of them. So I ended up spending triple because I was putting on a credit card. And that's one of the things that we have to deal with as credit card users. Just beware of unexpected fees and interests, and keep a tight rein on yourself that you don't spend more than you would have otherwise.
Yeah, I think there's another factor there with unexpected spending. Nobody keeps a perfect ledger in their mind. And so if I'm living on a budget, I might think I know where I am in the gift department for this month. And so, I can get the 3 boxes of chocolates. And so I get them on the 2nd of the month. And then on the 5th of the month, I don't even remember that I just did that. You don't really know until the bill comes in whether or not you're hitting your budget or not. Not if you're not carrying a ledger around with you.
Right.
And there's something. Remember the old envelope system?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if
it's
people
not so
are still
old.
doing
It's
that.
alive and well.
Yeah. So you take your budget and you get it in cash and you put it in envelopes. This much for housing, this much for food, this much, and you have a visible record of how close you are to the end of your budget on each of those things. And I wonder if there's not a place for that still.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it, especially for beginners on budgeting. People that are just getting started using a budget might really benefit from that envelope system. If you've been doing a budget for a few years and you're kind of in the swing of things, you know where things are, you can eventually transfer over to a more of a ledger system where all your money is in one pot in the bank account, but you've got ledgers to account for what's in the bank.
All right, listen, I know we're gonna run out of time. And there was so much to talk about. Is there such a thing? Let me revisit credit cards. We've only got 2 minutes left, but I've got daughters in college, and they're saying they're offering me a credit card. Should a kid get a credit card? We've got 2 minutes left. They're graduating college next year. Should they get a credit card?
Here again, I will say that I don't think that the credit card is the problem. I think it's the inability to understand the workings of a credit card, the ability to control your expenditures by using a credit card. That's what the real problem is. So I don't know that a 19 or 20-year-old really has the wherewithal to comprehend some of the issues.
Well, they don't know how much life is going to cost quite yet.
Oh, exactly. One of my coworkers came in one time. He was all agitated. He was about 20 years old, just gotten married. And he came in all agitated to talk to his mom, the lady that was working for me. He said, "Mom, did you know that toothpaste costs money?"
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. At some point, unfortunately, we live in a world where you're going to have to establish some kind of credit or you can't rent an apartment, when you're getting started. And so it's kind of but generally speaking, we've been talking about stewardship, and I think the big idea here again is that life is just better when you remember you don't own anything.
Yes.
And that it all belongs to God, and that He has privileged you to manage what belongs to Him, and at the same time, He's guaranteed that your needs, and we're not talking wants, right? But needs will be met. Bill, I know that you also help people with estate planning and how to get ready for when you don't have a steady income and those kinds of things down the road. How can people reach you really quickly? I hear the music, so... Bill@vop.com is the... Great, so people can just email you.
Or get on the website.
I know you spend a lot of time with people helping them prepare for down the road. It's one of the things that you do as a ministry in helping people meet God's needs and theirs at the same time.
Yes.
That's the music, though. Listen to that. We are out of time because we talked so much. But until next time, I'm Shawn. I've been with Bill Hay, and you've been listening to Disclosure. God bless you until we meet again.